a $2 billion tax bond in the future. And as an anecdote, I wanted to say that Houston, after their horrible flooding event that happened 2 years ago, they just passed a $2 billion bond measure to address the flooding issue. And about $500 million of that money, of that bond, will go towards preserving open space and acquiring lands in the flood areas to protect the community from future flooding events. We also are seeing what's happening with wildfires all across California. Who's to say that we aren't due for one? What about an earthquake, right? We haven't had a major earthquake in a long time. Why not make us safe? And Robert said earlier that this would bring our taxes from $700 to $1,400 a year. That's completely miscalculated. The tax assessment of this is about $100 a year for the average household. So it's 11 cents per $1,000 assessment value. I just want to be transparent so you all understand what you would be paying for with this.
So 11 cents for every $100.
$1,000. Yeah. So that might be why your calculations are off. And like I said earlier, this is really used to leverage other funding that we have, that if you feel like, wow, we've been paying all these taxes, where is it all going? All of it is being used to leverage funding locally. So if you don't feel like you want to spend any more money on on state bond measures, then don't vote for state bond measures. Let's support our city. Let's vote locally, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Thank you, Robert. Let's give a big... Let's have a change of panel over here. Mackenzie, you stay. But we need to get Mark Hinkle on the podium. Well, Mackenzie has already been introduced, so let me introduce Mark Hinkle. Mark is an independent business owner. He is former national chairman of the U.S. Libertarian Party, and he is president of the Silicon Valley Taxpayers Association. So help me welcome Mark Hinkle. So let's get started with the next measure. This is MeasureV, and I'll ask the speakers to take 3 minutes each to make their positions.
Hi again, everyone. So MeasureV is a general obligation bond measure for $450 million. That's 8 cents per $1,000 assessed value. That will provide meaningful housing solutions for our grown children, our friends, our family, and community members. It is endorsed by our mayor and 9 of our council members, state senators Jim Bell and Bill Monning, assembly members Ash Kalra, Evan Lowe, Hanson Chu, county supervisors Dave Cortese, Cindy Chavez, and Ken Yeager, League of Women Voters, the Sierra Club, the San Jose Silicon Valley Chamber of Commerce, all of our local housing groups, and many, many more, including the Santa Clara County Democratic Party. So why do we need MeasureV? It's no question that we have a housing crisis in the Bay Area, and it's something that we can't ignore. People who work 2, even 3 jobs are struggling to afford housing. Families are being forced to choose between healthcare, groceries, and a savings account just to pay the rent. And young adults like me can't afford to live or pay rent in the same city that we grew up in, let alone even imagine ever buying a house here. And well over 4,000 people are homeless in San Jose. MeasureV will address this crisis by providing housing affordable for working families, veterans, seniors, teachers, nurses, paramedics. It will help homeless residents get off of our local streets and out of our creeks and parks. The existing market simply is not producing affordable units. Now, why would developers want to produce affordable units when there's no incentive and a low return on investment? The market just isn't producing them. MeasureV will create that incentive and will fund 3,600 affordable units, bridging the gap between existing funding and our goal of reaching 10,000 affordable units by 2022. It also saves money. Housing the most troubled homeless individuals costs less than leaving them on the street, saving taxpayers $19,000 per person in annual public services. And just to break it down for you so you really understand who this funding would go towards, of the $450 million, at least $150 million would be spent to house people who are homeless or earning the minimum wage. Nearly $220 million would be spent to build units for couples and families making a combined income between $32,000 and $94,000 a year. So these are our preschool teachers, our nonprofit lawyers, young professionals, receptionists. 75 to 100 million will be used to fund housing for families making a combined income between 75,000 and 150,000 a year. So these are our nurses, paramedics, and senior teachers at our local schools. Measure V includes tough fiscal accountability requirements, including independent citizens oversight, independent financial audits, and full public review of all spending to ensure every cent creates housing that is affordable for working families. Please vote yes on Measure V.
My name is Mark Hinkle, and before I go into the specifics, I'd like to let you know, or I'd like to ask some feedback from you. This is something that I've learned many years ago, is to kind of learn your audience. So I'd like to ask you 3 simple questions. How many people here do not pay enough in taxes? Can I see a show of hands? Do not pay enough in taxes. We've got 2. How many people pay about the right amount of taxes? Can I see a show of hands? 1, 2, 3. Okay. And how many people here pay too much in taxes? You're my audience, all right. So look, if you don't pay enough in taxes, by all means, vote for this bond measure because you're going to pay a lot more in taxes. But by the way, you can send in extra money if you don't pay enough. You can voluntarily send money. But if you don't, if you pay the right amount of taxes, or if you pay too much, clearly you want to vote no on Measure V. The Silicon Valley Taxpayers, by the way, has endorsed a no vote on A, T, and V. And let me set something straight here. When governments come to you with a tax increase, what are they effectively saying? Everything that's currently in their budget is a priority, and everything that's not in their budget is not a priority. So for example, here's something that the city of San Jose has in their budget. Bread and circuits, free day in the park with barbecue, drinks, lots of stuff. This is in their budget. This is a priority. Low-cost housing, not on the budget, not a priority. This November, there are 24 tax increases on the ballot throughout the county. That's almost $4 billion. And by the time it's paid off in 25 to 35 years, that's going to be more like $8 billion. That's over $4,000 per person, every man, woman, and child in the county. Can we afford that? Clearly, no. Just the Santa Clara budget alone is over $2,000 per person. Entire county, Santa Clara County. Getting down into specifics, I encourage you to take a look at the voter handbook, to look at the details of what is proposed on Measure V. Oh, wait a minute. You can't, because the city omitted the details from this measure. Now you can go to the county clerk's website and dig into the detailed information, but it's not here. Now, I'm not a devious mind by upbringing. Perhaps you can think of some reason why the city of Santa Clara or city of San Jose wants to hide those facts from you. I haven't a clue. I think the word fungible came up in a conversation. Every budget has fungible money. If you add a tax increase with a bond, guess what? That means money that was in their budget can now be spent on the bond, and the money that was spent on infrastructure can now be spent on pensions, increased salaries, more benefits. All money, government money, is fungible. these measures are supposed to have bond oversight committees. As president of the Silicon Valley Tax Association, typically we get invitations to get people on bond oversight committees. But guess who gets to choose the majority of the people? The proponents of the bond. And my time's up.
Thank you, Mark. Let's move on to the written questions. Matt, your first question.
Great, I have two questions here related to Leland and Bret Hart. So the question is, will or could MeasureV money go to San Jose Unified for low-income housing displacing Bret Hart and Leland, or other San Jose Unified locations for low-income housing? And I think we probably want to start with McKinsey.
So to my understanding, yes, that is a potential. I also understood that the plan was to build affordable housing for teachers. Is that correct? I didn't go to the community meeting. So the idea would be to create communities where the people who are working in the community can also live in the community. Also, this would have to be approved by City Council. They would have to determine if that was a priority for them to build housing in places like Almaden. Most of the projects would probably be prioritized in areas close to transit and the downtown core, not in the outer edges of the city. That's what my understanding is. But to answer your question and to be completely honest, yes, that funding could be used for that.
I understand this idea is being floated to basically demolish Leland High School and Bret Hart Junior High School, or middle school, I guess they're now called. When I went to school, they were junior high schools, and then move the campuses. So, for you people who live in Almaden Valley, do you want affordable housing in your neighborhood? Do you want these sort of projects in your neighborhood? And when you think of the word project, does the word slum come to mind? It certainly does for me. You have to ask yourself, why don't we have affordable housing in Santa Clara County? It's because we restricted the law of supply and demand, because almost 25% of the cost of building new housing is government red tape. We have zoning laws and we have building codes, all dramatically increase the cost of housing. The reason why we need affordable housing and why the proponents want this bond measure to pass is because this is a government-created problem with a government-created solution. And guess what? You get to pay both sides of the issue. Bad idea.
Okay, a lot of questions coming in, quite a few about Leland Bret Hart, but I think we've addressed those. An informational question, which is, what is the source of repayment for MeasureV? So how will the bonds be repaid over time?
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused.
I think the question is, from what revenue source will bonds be repaid over time? What is the source of repayment for MeasureV?
I'm not sure if they have a specific source already identified or if they wait until after. Do you happen to know, Mark?
Property tax. That's where bond money gets paid for, is on property taxes, as far as I know.
As I recall, reading from the ballot argument, it was about $80 per $1 million of assessed valuation on your property tax every year.
Yeah, it's 8 cents per $1,000. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. I'm sorry. Yes, it's a property tax. So the average person will be paying $80 on an average home. So 8 cents per $1,000.
So $80 a year for the average.
Right.
Okay. A couple other informational questions just to clarify, and then a couple more, I think, philosophical ones. So one here is about qualification. The questioner says, did I hear correctly that this money would go to provide housing for people making up to $150,000 a year?
Yeah, so the city council actually put a limit on that. It was originally as little as 150 million now, or 75 million. Now they've capped that at 100 million. So that's a family of 4. That's where they get that $150,000 calculation. So that's for a family of 4. So the total income of that family. So we're talking about nurses, paramedics, senior teachers, and you have to understand that now they've done estimates that you have to make a combined income of about $274,000 a year to be able to buy a house in San Jose. It's pretty skyrocketed, it's pretty crazy. So for someone like me, I would never be able to even imagine being able to live near my parents in the future, unless I want to pay about 60% of my salary, 75% of my salary on rent and have no savings account.
So let me get this straight. In order to provide affordable housing, we're going to increase the cost of housing. Excuse me? How in the world does that work? Is somebody smoking pot or LSD? You can't increase the cost of housing and reduce the cost of housing at the same time. And again, I pointed out, almost 25% of the cost of new housing is government red tape. My wife is an architect. She deals with the city of San Jose all the time. In Silicon Valley, everybody's all about high tech, right? Not the city of San Jose. If you want plans submitted to the county building department, guess what? 6 copies of your plans on paper. This is high tech Silicon Valley, and yet decidedly low tech city of San Jose. It's a complete waste of money and time.
And then the next informational questions are, if you know, where would the units likely be built and who would maintain them? I don't know if you have that
So
information.
I wouldn't be able to answer that honestly and correctly because we don't know where the units would be built, but the city of San Jose in their general plan, they do prioritize building in urban transit-centered communities. So that's where they would want a lot of the projects to be built. And who would be maintaining?
Who would
So
maintain?
whoever owns the units there and after, so whether that's the developer or if they sell it to another landowner or landlord, that would be who would be maintaining the units.
Does everybody know what the term NIMBY means? Not in my backyard? Yeah, who wants a slum in their backyard? Nobody does. And that's exactly what these are. There's a government-run project housing, low-cost housing. Everybody knows that homeowners take much better care of their property than renters do. And the stack and pack housing, here's something that is virtually never mentioned. Where is the high crime rate? Is it in suburban areas or high impact stack and pack housing? That's where the crime is. So you literally are creating slums and centers of crime, drugs, prostitution with government-run, government-built housing projects. It's a bad, bad idea.
A question for the pro side, which is, this would be hard to estimate, but to what extent would passage of this bond solve the housing crisis in San Jose?
So this is how it's calculated. So they take that $450 million, the city will put $125,000 towards each unit, and it costs about $500,000, $600,000 to build one unit nowadays, by the way. So that's how you get the 3,600 units that's expected to be built from this bond measure. And that is split between the different income levels, whether it's people who are homeless and making minimum wage to people who are making close to $75,000, $90,000 a year, families.
I recommend anybody, if you want to find out what teachers are really being paid, which by the way, California teachers are the highest paid in the nation. So if we're trying to cry poverty for teachers, don't buy it. First of all, they don't work a full year. Average worker who works in the private sector typically works about 240 days a year. Teachers typically about 180 to 185 days a year. And so if you extrapolate that on a full day or a full year pay, they are in fact making the equivalent of over $100,000. Far more than I as a small business making in my business. So to cry poverty, again, do you really want to create poverty centers with these slum projects? I'm sorry, it's a very bad idea. And let me also point out, bond measures are just like mortgages. They have to be paid off with interest. So it's really a lie to say it's a $450 million bond measure. It's twice that or more. So you're gonna get, maybe you get $400 million worth of benefit, but it's gonna cost you twice that. Not a good deal.
Another question about what exactly the affordable housing means, and this question is, are they high-rise apartments, trailer parks, or something else?
So it could be any mixture of what you said. One of the ideas was to put money towards refurbishing mobile home parks to allow, for example, veterans and seniors to live there continuously, because there's a lot of mobile home parks in our county that have been shutting down or being suggested that they shut down. So they can refurbish existing buildings, they can buy land for a high-rise apartment, but really the denser it is, the more cost-effective it is. So I think it'd be mostly high-density units. But once again, I can't foresee the future.
Question about beneficiaries and how they would be selected. For example, would priority be given to government workers like teachers? And a follow-on, which is, or would this encourage low-income individuals to come to San Jose and take advantage of this program? It's sort of about who are the beneficiaries of the program, how are they selected?
Right, so since Mark has been saying that this is a government-run project, that's not true at all. It'll be run by the developer and the landowner. The government, the city will not own any of these projects. They're just going to put funding towards them. Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, the question is just, the first question here is really about how the beneficiaries
How
will
they'll
be
be, so
selected.
that's where I was getting with this. So it'll be up to the developers or the landlords to choose the people that live there, but they will have to prove their income levels to show that they are low income, very low income, what have you.
And then the second half was about incentives and whether or not this kind of program encourages more people, more low-income individuals to come to San Jose.
From where? Would be my question. So I don't think anybody from, for example, Oklahoma, who can't afford to live in Oklahoma on their salary, would want to come to live into San Jose, where it's even more cost prohibitive on that salary. So my gut instinct would say, no, I can't see people moving from out of state to come live in these housing units.
I make 2 points. One, there are always unintended consequences with government-run projects, always. I don't know, I forgot what my second point is, but again, the other point is follow the money. Is this really about affordable housing for low-income people? Well, where's the money going? It's going to developers. Those are the special interests that are promoting bond measures, and again, where does the majority of the money goes? It goes to bondholders, it goes to banks, it goes to bond investors, not affordable housing. And again, why do we not have affordable housing? The government is standing in the way with building codes, zoning laws, and the fees to get housing built, and the requirement to hire very high-paid professionals to work your way through the building and planning department. It literally costs thousands of dollars to add a mother-in-law quarter to your house, thousands of dollars in fees, which frankly, in many cases, prohibits people from actually doing that because of the high cost of the fees and the professional help to wind your way through the labyrinth that's the planning department and the building department of the city of San Jose.
Good job. I think we got through about 10 or 12 questions. Well done, everyone. And those are all the questions I have.
Thank you.
One more.
Thanks. Just another question about is just clarifying who actually owns the units. If you could just go through again the mechanism of how this works. So we're passing a bond.
Yeah.
That's revenue for the city.
Right.
Who owns the units? How does that work?
So it's not the city who owns the units. A developer will approach them. This is to incentivize developers, right? Because they're not being incentivized right now. There's a very low return on investment with affordable housing units because they already cost $500,000 to $600,000 to construct with rising construction costs. The city will say, okay, we'll put $125,000 towards this unit. And then the developer will sell the unit to a landlord or whoever is assessed to be the correct person to live there based on their income level. So It'll be the person who either builds the development or whoever they sell that development to. It's not the government.
A limit on how much?
A limit on how much what?
How much they can give per house?
I believe it's 125. Yeah, there is a limit, and I believe that's either in our city charter or it's somewhere in our budget that it's. I can find you that information, but I know that 125 is our limit. It's a policy. It's a policy. Sorry.
If they sell to someone who's low income, that person no longer low income, years later, they still own it.
It's a deed restriction, so that if you can't sell the unit, you can't buy the unit for low income and then sell it for a higher price.
You can still live there even with that money.
Sure. I don't know why you would want to though if it's a one-bedroom apartment.
Mackenzie, I have a question for you. You know, it seems to me that we have in the socioeconomic spectrum, the people at the top, they can afford their housing. People at the bottom need assistance, they cannot afford it. We need affordable housing. And we have programs at the state level, county level, city level, and so on, which is good. We need to help our fellow citizens out. But what happens to those who are in the middle, who cannot qualify for assistance and who just cannot afford it? What are they supposed to do?
So this addresses families of four that are making up to $150,000 per year. So above that, it seems to me that, I'm just talking off the cuff here, but it seems to me that there are affordable options out there for people making more than $150,000 a year. So we're really addressing the range of $0 a year, whether that's a homeless person, minimum wage, which is about $30,000 a year, all the way up to $150,000. And the bulk of the money, about 50% of the money, is going towards people making between $30,000 and $90,000 a year. That's $30,000 for a couple and $90,000 for a family.
So those who are in the middle who can, who cannot afford it may need to work more than one job to make ends meet.
Right, so they're either working more than one job, they don't have a savings account, that's how they end up homeless. They're working minimum wage at Walmart and they don't have benefits. A life-changing event happens to them, whether it's something as minuscule as they get bronchitis for a week, they're out of their job, they aren't able to pay rent, and they end up on the streets. So those are the people that need the help, as well as a lot of people in our community, people that work at your Safeway, who teach, your young teachers who are teaching your children. People who are young professionals like me who want to live near their family when they graduate from college and even making a decent living wage. I can't justify spending 60-75% of my salary on rent alone, let alone having money for a car payment, for health care, for any other savings account. So, yeah.
Mark, how would you respond to that?
Look, you can't make housing affordable by increasing the cost of housing, and that's exactly what MeasureV does. And again, you look at what's going on the ballot this November, there are 24 separate tax increases, and if they all pass, and likely they probably will all pass, that's over $4,000 per person, every single man, woman, and child. In a house of four folks, that's $16,000 in tax increases. How is that going to make housing more affordable? It can't. It just can't.
Thank you. I'll give you 1 minute each to summarize our positions.
So as we've sat here, I have to hand it to you, Mark, somewhat offended by the terms that you've been using for these projects. I don't consider a place where our teachers, nurses, paramedics, younger families live, I don't consider that slums. It's not government run, there's not drugs and prostitution. It's simply a safe place to live where they're not spending 50-60% of their paycheck on rent, where they can afford to get their children Christmas presents, where they can afford to have good health care for their family, and if there's a life-changing event in their life so that it doesn't completely disrupt them and put them out on the streets. These aren't slums, these are good places to house our community members, the people that you see in your community every day, veterans, seniors, people who are struggling to make ends meet here as the cost of living continues to go up. I think that's just fear mongering to call them slums, and I'm offended by that term because this would be a place that, for example, I would live, or the people my age who went to Leland and can't live here anymore would live. People who teach your children at Leland would live. And to your point of all this red tape that the government is stopping all this housing from being built, I'm sorry, but I think code enforcement is a little bit important. I would like to know that the buildings I'm walking into are safe and they've been looked over by a person, not just a computer. And you can remove all the red tape that you want. There simply is no market that's going to produce affordable housing. This is simple supply and demand. You increase the supply, you address the affordable housing crisis. So I urge you, please remember that this is going towards the people that live and work in your community. It's the right thing to do to make sure that future generations can afford to live here. Thank you.
Thank you. Mark, 1 minute.
All right. This is a priority to the city of San Jose. Affordable housing, it clearly is not. Because this is in the budget and affordable housing is not in their current budget. Everything that is in their budget, as far as the city of San Jose is concerned, is a priority. Anything not in their budget is not a priority. Measure T and B clearly are not a priority because it's not in their budget. If you think 911 calls are a priority, it should be in the budget, not putting in T or B. And again, how in the world do you increase the supply of housing by decreasing the supply of housing? How do you make it more affordable by making it more expensive? Which is exactly what MeasureV does. It is physically, monetarily impossible to do. You add cost to housing, whether you're a renter or a homeowner, that's going to increase your cost of housing. It's unavoidable. And again, what's the cause? Zoning laws that restrict zoning to R1, building codes, and the fees charged by the city of San Jose. That makes housing more costly. End of story.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mark Hinkle. Thank you, Mackenzie Wilson.
Thank
Let's
you.
Let's have a change of panel. I would like to call Mehan on the podium. For the last measure, Measure U, we have only one speaker, and that is Mehan. He will summarize Measure U and will present pro and con arguments, and will also answer any questions. Let me introduce Matt.
Sure.
Matt is a CEO and co-founder of Brigade. This is a venture-backed startup company. It is the first voter network. He is a board member of AVCA over here. He is board member of Silicon Valley Leadership